The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. I am back, but fear not, Pat is also here, and we have much to discuss today. The Supreme Court is going to be the nexus, so to speak, of a showdown over the rights of LGBTQ employees. And the justices today are going to hear a set of cases that will test whether the federal law that bars sex discrimination in employment applies to LGBTQ employees. And this is a really important thing for a few different reasons. Number one, we have seen since the Supreme Court's decision in June of 2015, a move of the battle lines of the fight for LGBT rights go from can just any two people that want to get married, which is what was established by that June 2015 decision, to you can still be fired for your real or perceived sexual orientation in 20-something states. That needs to be dealt with. There is the use of so-called religious freedom as a proxy by which you can still discriminate, get away with a lot of discrimination when it comes to LGBTQ rights. And one of the big questions is, does a statute about sex discrimination apply to LGBTQ status and employees? And so there is so much riding on this, Pat, because the battle lines have moved to exactly this issue. And I don't really know, I hesitate to ever make a prediction about what a particular Supreme Court is going to do. We do have a pretty conservative Supreme Court at this point in time.
Yeah, so this goes back to the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which prevents discrimination based on sex. But of course, there's an open question over whether or not sex can be interpreted to mean also gender identity or sexual orientation. And it's an interesting thing because if you go by the letter of the law and what sex meant at that time, I think it stands to reason that you can't say that now retroactively sex also means gender identity and sexual orientation. But of course, that's not the ruling that I want to see happen. I want to make it so that employers can't discriminate against employees based on LGBT status. So my principle on this issue tells me one thing, and what I want to actually happen tells me another thing. So that's where I think it gets conflicting.
I'm sort of on board with you. So, okay, I don't think I have to disclose this to the audience, but I think the audience knows. I think that LGBTQ status should be protected from employment discrimination, period. Like, that's my position. If I say to myself, does it make sense that what was called sex in 1964 would now include gender identity and sexual orientation? It feels like it's a stretch. I agree with you. However, what about the argument that, the thing is, if you talk about race, our understanding of race in 64 is also different than our understanding now. Like the issue of the Jewish race. Of course, we know about Judaism, the religion, but we now also know that, and we did at the time, but it wasn't as much of a prevalent thing. We know that Judaism is also an ethnicity. You can convert to Judaism. You're not going to be ethnically Jewish, but if you're born to two Ashkenazi Jewish parents, you are Ashkenazi Jewish. That's an ethnicity. There are certain medical indicators that go with that. That, I believe, would fall under, aside from the religious protection, I think we would say that that is protected by race today, wouldn't we? And therefore, maybe an expansion is warranted.
Yeah, I think that's the best argument that you make, and I think that's the argument that the liberal justices on the court will have to make. I mean, ideally, we would be able to solve this stuff in Congress. Like, Congress would be able to just pass a brand new act saying that you can't discriminate based on LGBT status. But of course, it's just hard to get things passed these days, especially with Republicans in control of one part of the Congress and Democrats in control of the other part of the Congress. So much of the legislative work in government now is coming from the courts, and that's kind of goes to what you talked to Tom Hartman about last week. And we don't necessarily want to see that. We'd like to see the power put back in the hands of Congress and taken away from the Supreme Court.
I think one thing that we can say is, in advance of whatever the Supreme Court will ultimately decide, we have other ways to deal with this. This can be dealt with at the state level. Many states are dealing with it. Again, in many states, it is included. LGBTQ status, sexual orientation, and gender identity are just part of the state's non-discrimination ordinance or statute. Even if the Supreme Court doesn't go our way on this, I think the big picture is that the trend is still going in the right direction, but it would be obviously fantastic to get a boost from the Supreme Court, even though we then zoom out and we still have those broader concerns that Tom Hartman talked about last week about courts making law in this way. And that's a bigger conversation probably to follow up on a different day. Here's a local story I saw. National Grid, which provides, so my gas company is National Grid, but they're also an electric company, and in different parts of Massachusetts, they provide one or the other. National Grid has fired an employee who was wearing a Trump hat, confronted a woman from Belmont, Massachusetts, which is a Boston suburb, about the bumper stickers on her SUV. And the scene was captured on video. It was reported to the company. The worker has not been identified as of right now. You see him driving a National Grid van, stopping, seeing this woman's bumper sticker emblazoned Subaru, backing up to the vehicle. The stickers were, I support national parks, I support equality, I support LGBT families, I support Elizabeth Warren. The employee blasted his horn and blared a talk radio station until the woman went up to him and then said, I just hate all of your expletive on your car. I assume that's I hate all of the shit on your car. This is all on video. The guy is wearing a bright red Trump hat. He is an absolutely disgusting and vile, vile person. And, you know, Pat, this is one of those things where you will start to hear from the right. His speech has been violated. He is a representative of the company when he is driving a National Grid van. He is supposed to comport himself in accordance with the code, the behavior code, and it doesn't really matter what he was yelling. This is not appropriate behavior. National Grid is right to get rid of him. This is not someone National Grid wants representing them. Full stop. That's it.
Yeah, I think while he's on the clock at National Grid, he shouldn't be even able to wear the Trump hat.
I agree.
I mean, doing the honking and the harassing, that's one thing. Of course, we all are against that, especially over political stuff. I mean, when you're representing a company, you can't do that. But even just apparel, I think that you have to make him take that off as well. This is definitely the right decision here, and it just entirely has to do with the nature of the job, I think. I don't know, like if I was out and about in the streets of Boston and I decided to wear like a Bernie Sanders shirt and berate passersby about the apparel that they have on, or, you know, yell at people who have bumper stickers that I don't like, would you find that to be a problem? If I did the exact same thing that guy did, would I have to go to David Pakman Show Human Resources and have them take me up on that?
So you're saying if you did it not in your role as producer, but just on your own time if you did it?
Yeah, maybe I had like a David Pakman Show hat to, like, you know, kind of tie me to the company in some sense.
I think it would be a problem. I mean, yeah, I do think if you were harassing people on the street, I mean, listen, even if it wasn't political, if I found out that an employee was actively harassing people on the street and they were linked to my company, I would have to take action, I think. I mean, that is something that would hurt the reputation of my company, and it would be extremely problematic for sure. And I think I mean, obviously, legally, it would be completely within my rights to say this behavior is unbecoming of employees.
All right, well, I'll have to stop doing that before a video of me doing that surfaces.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I think this is definitely the right decision. National Grid has to get rid of this guy. Maybe he can find employment somewhere else. Like maybe he can work for a right-wing show, or
Sure.
he can work for right-wing politicians. But I don't think that working for an electric company is the right job for him.
I have a little audio. Let's just take a listen to it here.
I just paint all your on your car.
Oh, that's really pleasant.
Isn't that great?
Hey, you wanna
Yeah,
do
yeah.
this for us?
Why don't you redo it,
Call the
redo
police.
it? Yeah.
Call the police.
No,
Let's also
well-
call.
Oh,
National-
interestingly, the guy actually sounds sort of drunk, although that hasn't been mentioned. And if he has a speech impediment, I don't want to be, you know, then I take this back. But the guy also just generally sounds unstable. I don't know what your impression was of it, Pat.
Yeah, I mean, this is the type of guy that I've met dozens and dozens of times here
Yeah,
in Boston. It's not
with his
like
accent and
it's not
everything.
too jarring to me. Not only just over the accent, but also the behavior, like that aggressive nature. I see that all the time. So for me, it's not very shocking. But I'd imagine for a lot of other people watching, this kind of stands out.
Yeah, I mean, this guy, this is like if you just walk down the street if you walk down West Broadway in South Boston, Massachusetts, you will get plenty of people just like this guy with pickup trucks covered in bumper stickers that I'm sure are not, they're not exactly the most enlightened when it comes to LGBT rights, is what I would predict about the bumper stickers. Okay, deep fake videos. Deep fake videos, if you haven't heard about them, are videos where someone could take this video of me, for example, that people are looking at, and they would digitally replace both my voice but also my lips. And it would very convincingly make it look like I was saying other things. And they would probably not be things that make me look particularly good. And the rise of this technology is now exploding. And it is in particular being used for fake porn content. I'm guessing the idea is, Pat, that you put like a celebrity's face on porn and then they seem almost like celebrity sex tapes or something like that. Is that the gist of what they're doing?
Yeah, that would be incredibly disturbing. I mean, I think it was what is it, like a very, very high percentage of this stuff is just coming from porn.
Yeah.
And 15,000 videos on the internet so far. Like that number seems small compared to like the number of online videos. But if you see like the spike of where these deepfake things are going,
yeah,
it's huge. It's just massive. And I think it's going to take off over the next few years for sure.
This is going to be, I mean, I don't know how we fight this in the sense that these are creative endeavors. These are people making videos, and you can say these are satirical or whatever. But when the technology becomes so good that it is impossible to distinguish it from the real thing, and I don't know if it's there yet. I've seen some of these done like with George W. Bush and Putin. It still looks a little bit off. But if the video is sort of grainy or the faces aren't zoomed in, these things can definitely pass for real. This is going to absolutely and totally wreak havoc.
Yeah, it's close. It's like 80 or 90% of the way there.
Yeah.
I saw one of Joe Rogan made into Dr. Evil in an Austin Powers scene, and it wasn't ultimately convincing. I just found it funny. And of course, like the use of deepfakes for that sort of thing, I think we're all okay with because we all know that it's in good fun and it's not going to like defame the person who is being represented in the video. But what about if we apply this to like an election? Of course, in 2016, there was a lot of fake news. There were a lot of quotes attributed to candidates that they'd actually didn't say. What if you make a deepfake video of, let's say, Elizabeth Warren saying something terrible and a bunch of Trump supporters circulate it, they now believe it to be true, and then no one follows up on the update that that was actually a deepfake.
Right.
It does permanent damage, and we may have to deal with that like this very election cycle.
Now, the truth is, like, there's a point of view which would be this will get sorted out on its own in the sense that, so like 20 years ago, I remember starting to mess with Photoshop, and I would take someone's body, and I remember once I took my boss's face from my like job I had when I was 14, and I put his face on the body, and you know, you sort of try to match the skin tone, but it's like it doesn't really look good, and I brought it in and I showed it to him, and it's like, okay, that's a still image. We all are accustomed to when you see a still image and it doesn't look right, even if it looks pretty good, but it seems like it's the wrong context, you have your guard up about this could be fake. But because the technology was not around, we believe that if a video looks a certain way, it's real and you can trust it. Part of this may just be a realignment. Like maybe there will be some shift that happens where people will start to have a mechanism where they can determine what is likely to be a deepfake video and it's not. And like maybe we're worried too much about it and we don't need to because there will be some solution found.
Yeah, I don't know. Like with Photoshop, I think it's easy to like plug a photo into software and to do like a reverse Google image search and to see whether or not a photo has been doctored.
Sure.
So you can do that now. It's kind of like we found a way around Photoshop. It's like we realize what these editors are doing. Maybe the same thing can happen with deep fake videos. I'd imagine that it may actually kind of be easier because I think an algorithm could pick up on what has been doctored in a video easier than a photo because you're just dealing with more total images.
Right.
So I think we can find a way around it, but I also think that maybe there'll be like a generational divide on this stuff where younger people who are like more exposed to the technology can easily pick out the deep fakes, whereas older people who may not even realize that this technology exists yet are more easily fooled by it.
Well, the sad thing
that
about that is studies about who is particularly likely to fall for and spread fake news, just like written articles, it's older folks. And we saw that during the election, and a number of studies have shown that. So this is not an ageist attack of any kind. It's the data suggests that what you're saying, Pat, is likely to be the way that there starts to be a generational divide. It's concerning. I don't know. I mean, like, there's really nothing we can do about it right now that I can think of.
And what generation is more likely to vote? The older generation.
They are more likely to vote as well. Yeah, that's why this is so very much important. It's great to be back on the bonus show. New bonus show tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.